right, welcome to the third episode of the Reserve Squad. I have with us the full panel: Andy, Frankie, Tyler, and myself, Cameron. So just make sure you get a chance, or when you get a chance after listening, you go to our Instagram and our YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube. It's just the Reserve Squad, and our Instagram has the same handle, the Reserve Squad. Make sure you give it a follow. Give maybe the most recent post a like, what have you. But definitely, we appreciate the engagement from all our current followers. Things are going well, and we're off to a good start. So thank you, everyone, for listening. We really appreciate it. So we have a lot of topics to cover this week. Premier League had a lot of games. Started off with FA Cup, and we're getting close to the end of the season. So we're going to touch base a little bit on our thoughts on who may be winning like the Golden Boot and what's going on with any other records that might be out there. So let's get into it. FA Cup. That seems like it was a month and a half ago already. Not in soccer.
For real.
We had some good games. Not everyone was playing their full squads, to be expected with the fights going on in Europe. But for FA Cup, we had City beating Newcastle 2-0, Chelsea beating Leicester 1-0, Arsenal beating Sheffield 2-1, and I think we had a prediction there that got correct. Someone got correct, but most of us were way off. And we had United beating Norwich 2-1, and might I say, probably FA Cup game of the week. That United Norwich game. So good games for the semifinals upcoming. We have Gunners versus City. Looking forward to that one with kind of some form going on in the current squads, and looking forward to United Chelsea. We got some informed United, you might say. The Red Devils are looking great, and a young Chelsea squad that anyone they put out there right now looks threatening. So excited for those. You guys got any takes on FA Cup during the week?
Yeah, like you said, I'm definitely looking forward to I'm definitely looking forward to Man U being red hot right now. It's about time we're seeing them and their youth really getting into the team, getting some good results. So Chelsea's definitely got to look out for them.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, I'd say there was a lot of good games that went on this weekend. The United Norwich was definitely a little bit cringy for me, but I would overall say that the Chelsea-Leicester game was also very impactful. I'm really excited for the semifinals. I feel like all the teams that you would kind of expect to win their games won their games for the most part. So it'll be exciting to see for the semifinals, and I think both teams all four teams are going to bring it this week.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a very interesting week when it comes up. United and Chelsea is always an interesting one, not only for the whole Premier League, but specifically our group of friends. We've got some hardcore United and hardcore Chelsea fans. So I'm excited to see that one and see who gets bragging rights this year. But I'm also excited to see Arsenal and City, right? Arsenal is something we're going to talk about in a little bit. And I think that that's going to be an interesting matchup because those teams are both trending in directions that create a unique situation for both of them. And I'm really interested to see what happens with that, what kind of lineups they put out, and what kind of performances they have because both teams are going to want the FA Cup very badly.
Definitely. And we'll definitely kind of dissect those games when they get closer. They're not for a few weeks' time, so let's go ahead and move into Premier League. We had a bunch. In the midweek, we had some big games. We had teams that needed points got points. We had VAR controversy. We had all of it. We had champions getting waxed, So it was just a fully looked. And the midweek did not, disappoint. We had West Ham beating Chelsea 3-2 and a thriller. We had Everton beating Leicester 2-1. And maybe an upset win, some would say. Arsenal beating Norwich 4-0, which really kind of kicked them off and ignited them into, maybe some of what we'll talk about later, but some solid form. And then Sheffield beating the Spurs with the VAR controversy 3-1, and City beating the champions 4-0. I'm sorry, Frankie. But we'll funnel these games into our conversation later on. The only one we probably won't touch much on is Sheffield. So, I was surprised by Sheffield. Can't lie. 3-1 over the Spurs. Spurs look kind of disorganized. But that's kind of the rundown for the midweek. Any comments from you guys on those?
Definitely tagging on to the Sheffield Spurs result. That was probably the main highlight for me coming out of there. I mean, Spurs is supposed to be a top 6 club, and you shouldn't really expect them to get a result like that, especially in Sheffield's form since the start back. It had been pretty poor, and that's really the first result that they've pulled since coming back, and it was against the top 6 club. So, cheers to them.
Yeah, definitely. Luke, Tyler, anything?
Yeah, I think for me, midweek West Ham Chelsea was the biggest game. I know we'll go into a little bit more about West Ham here shortly, but I think that game, not only was it fantastic for a neutral fan, just awesome game all around, but if you're a West Ham supporter, that was a real spark that obviously continued, which I know we're getting into more detail, so I'll save my comments a little bit, but that game to me was the most important game of the midweek.
Yeah, I mean, London Derby. Don't forget. Yep. So the big games this weekend, they're fresh on our mind. We only got one game left tomorrow. For everyone to be played, for matches played kind of even. So just gonna run down the games, and then we'll go ahead and we'll talk about some teams that had big weeks, bad weeks, mixed weeks. So Arsenal Wolves 2-0, Chelsea over Watford 2-0. United in a thriller with Bournemouth 5-2. Foxes beating Palace. Leicester, for you who are not sure, the mascot, 3-0. Brighton and Norwich 1-0. Great bottom of the table game. Sheffield Burnley 1-1. Two defensive teams. Don't expect much there. Newcastle and West Ham 2-2. Liverpool Villa, the freshest game in our mind, 2-0 to Liverpool, and Southampton City, the latest game of the day, probably actually the most fresh in our mind. Southampton 1, City 0. Big game, big talking points there. Let's move into teams. So, Andy, Leicester City, give us the breakdown on what you think on their week and some stats you may have available.
Yeah, so Leicester, they started off with not that great of a week. They ended up playing Everton, and they lost 1-2 against them. It's 65% possession, 15 shots, 3 of them were on target. So you had kind of felt like Leicester should have put that game away and kind of have a little bit more of a comeback there. But at the end of the day, Everton ended up pulling it out and secured those 3 points. And then they played this past weekend, and they played against Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace lined up. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough offensive output from Crystal Palace to really compete with Leicester in that game. Leicester had about 52% possession. Again, 15 shots, only 4 of them on target. 3 of those ended up being goals. But you have to say that you kind of have to expect a little bit more of an offensive output from Leicester, especially when they're playing a team like Crystal Palace, who haven't been in as great a form. But all in all, Leicester have become kind of the most important piece into the race for the top 4, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit further. But Leicester need a little bit of a couple good performances in order for them to kind of keep up there and make it into the Champions League next year.
Definitely. Tyler, piggyback on that.
Yeah, I think a little bit more of a big picture perspective. I think those stats are really great, Andy. And for me, where I think of Leicester, going into this COVID situation, they were looking really good. Coming out and throughout this week, it was tough at first, right? Before this Palace game, their form was not great. And then they seem to have gotten it together a little bit against Palace. Obviously, a 3-0 win is a huge win for them. Might be a swing back in the other direction. But not only was their form bad, but, we talked about the FA Cup too. They couldn't beat Chelsea either. And because of these games, where their form wasn't quite wasn't as much there as they would obviously like, they've kind of dropped a little bit. They had third pretty secure when you think about it going into the week. It was in their control. They were pretty comfortable. And now I think they're only 3 points ahead of Manchester United and Chelsea in that group there, fighting for those final 4 spots. It's still possible that they may not end up in Europe, which I know is kind of a little bit of a bold statement, but it really depends on how much this Crystal Palace game turned things around for them. Ultimately, I think moving forward, they'll be fine, but it's something important to note. I know Andy said, they could be the most important piece to this battle for Europe, and I think that's what we're going to have to keep an eye on moving forward.
Definitely. Frankie, I'm going to kind of throw a curveball at you here with this. If you're Brendan Rodgers and you're in the Leicester locker room, coming into, after Project Restart, are you looking forward or are you looking backwards at your rear view, as a player, and what do you think Brendan Rodgers is telling those guys?
I would probably say, I feel like you can only really have to look forward. There's really no time to go back. You just got to, pick up the pieces of what you got and keep going forward. Like I said, you got to finish the season strong. And for me, the main thing with Leicester is, A team like that, I don't think they have as high as hopes as being a Premier League winning contender as much with how these other top 6 teams are coming back together now. And with that being said, if they're going to be qualifying for European competitions, how are they going to be able to perform on that level? If they're struggling here in the Premier League, how are they going to be doing against top clubs, around Europe? So I feel like a big thing that they need to do looking forward is looking to strengthen their squad with players that can bring consistent hard work so that they can compete in that level.
And you're an analytical guy on teams. What are they missing? Because everyone at the top is getting better and better and better.
Yep.
You have teams like Sheffield falling off. You have Spurs, figuring themselves out. Leicester's kind of in the same boat. What are they missing, Frankie?
For me, from what I've seen them playing, I think a pretty big piece for them would be probably another solid center back defender to go with Soyuncu. I think that's how you say his name. Usually their other defenders are Evans or Morgan, which aren't really, they're maybe at best like a B grade defender. And like I said, when you're playing on that European stage, you really need top tier players being out there. And then another thing that I think they need is probably like another strong winger that can really get up and down the flanks for them and really help create chances for the likes of Vardy, and to not put so much reliance on their midfielders to create plays and for Vardy to kind of do the job all on his own.
Gotcha. No, I throw that curveball at you, and we didn't talk about this, so sorry. Throw that
No,
at you.
That's good, man. I appreciate it. Keep me on my toes.
Yeah, right. I throw that at you because they might be an up and down team right now, and they want those spots. They do. Financially, they have to have them. Brendan Rodgers wants to be the most successful, manager, just like the rest of them. So I was just, it just hit me as we kind of got into this conversation of what maybe they can change up. For me personally, I don't think Leicester is moving in the right direction still. I think they played a Palace team that can't get it together. Palace we might be touching on them in a few weeks, going in detail about how they can't get it right. They can't get, Andy brought up, no goal production. It's been their problem for weeks. And, I think if Leicester is going to turn around, they need to play a team like Palace, who can't figure out themselves right now, who aren't going to be a threat, who have controversy. And is Van Aanholt their left back for the future? Is Zaha going to be there? I used to have a Premier League striker when, you're looking for 20 goals. It's just not his role. So I think maybe they just hit the right opponent this week, and hopefully they can find some form because, who doesn't want to see competition? But, I think Leicester in an interesting spot. Saying that, let's move to a team that's kind of in a good spot, or at least had a great week. The Gunners, Arsenal. Not any of us are Gunner fans, and I don't think most of us are going to enjoy this conversation, but the Gunners, they're doing the right things. Arteta, to me, they got belief in their manager. They're signing young players. Saka was huge, and he scored a goal, so great to see. And I think the pieces are going to come together. Aubameyang looks happy. I know that's hard to say, but he generally looks like he's enjoying his time in the team. Lacazette, maybe not so much, but they still don't have a defense. They need to fix that. If you ask me, they're in form. Norwich 4-0 was great for them. They needed that to just kind of get their feet wet, I think, and success again. And then, of course, the result over the weekend, over Wolves, another team fighting for European competition who looks good. I think it was good for Arsenal, and it was great for Arteta. Personally, I think he needed that. Tyler, you got anything off that?
Yeah, I think one of the key takeaways about Arsenal is you think back to last week when we talked our podcast, and anything we said about Arsenal was just the ultimate negativity. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I made a joke about my FA Cup prediction having something to do with David Luiz putting in an own goal because it's just so embarrassing to watch Arsenal. And then all of a sudden now we fast forward to this week, it's like, wow, they're in great form. Well, what happened, right? I mean, it's insane. You mentioned Norwich as a huge one, which it is true, right? Norwich, they're last in the Premier League. They're going down. We all know it. They're the perfect team to go against when you're trying to turn things around. And I think the stars aligned a little bit this week for Arsenal because not only were they able to, wax Norwich right off the field, but then they come in with a little bit of momentum going against Wolverhampton. Wolverhampton is a good team. I don't care what anyone says. They're fighting for Europe. They're fun to watch. Their manager has belief in their team. You talk about Arteta gaining the locker room and the belief from Arsenal. Well, Wolves are a good example of a player's coach and having a great locker room. And they didn't play bad, right? It's not like Wolves underperformed and Arsenal really just took advantage of them. No, I think both teams played well. It was a huge result for Arsenal, but my question is, can Arsenal keep this form consistent? I think throughout the entire season they've been a little inconsistent, and it goes proven evidently so from what we were talking about last week to what we were talking about this week. And now I'm curious, are we going to talk about them next week about how bad their form is? Is it going to go back the other way? I just don't know. I agree with you that I think it's starting to turn around. The contract extensions and the belief in Arteta, it seems like it's there, but one bad result and it could all go downhill again. So I think for me, the thing I'm looking forward to with Arsenal is consistency. Similar to last week, we touched on Martial and consistency. I think, can they keep putting up performances like that? And can they continue to do it against quality clubs? And that's where I'm coming from. So we'll see what happens.
Those are valid points. And Andy, I know you have some counterpoints as well with Wolves. Before we touch on that, Andy, what are your thoughts on the Norwich game? Do you think maybe, like, what happens if Arsenal lose that game? It could be a meltdown.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. So, I mean, when you kind of look at Arsenal and the form that they're currently in, it's inconsistent, and all it takes is for one result to completely change their momentum. So, I mean, it was really good that they got to play a club like Norwich, and that kind of segued, as Tower said, into giving them form into that game. So I think that when you kind of look at things, Arsenal need to have good performances and consistent performances from here on out. And that kind of starts with the leadership of David Luiz and the rest of the team pushing that team into the right direction and keeping them focused, because it was kind of night and day difference with their performances in recent games and then their performances, today, where they played Wolverhampton, and they were well organized with the back three. I mean, David Luiz ran the show. They were pretty well set up, and they kind of need to keep that momentum going in the future for sure.
Definitely. They're fun to watch right now, though. This week they've been fun to watch. Frankie, what's your take on Arsenal?
Like most of you guys said, they've been more fun to watch lately as of past games, which is really good to see. My main thing with them is moving forward into next season. Hopefully they can get a Europa League spot once again. It's kind of something that they really need. And whether they do or not, I think a big question for them is if they can hold on to some of their key players like Aubameyang, that are really like their A-grade players that can be there to lead and bring out the performances, while their younger players like Saka can grow into full-grown players that can actually perform on the European stage and get them back into top spots in the Premier League.
Now, to counter the Europa League concept, I kind of feel like their goal is FA Cup. Like, I know they want Europe, but I think they also understand it might not be realistic. I think Arteta really wants that FA Cup, and FA Cup is a big tradition at Arsenal. If I'm not wrong, they have a bunch of them. Arsene Wenger led them the way. So I hope that they push for FA Cup, and that's a realistic goal. And of course, I hope they have hopes for Europe. But it's definitely interesting to see what that North London team's going to do. Now, West Ham is good old East London. They've had a great week. David Moyes is pulling it together. Tyler, lead us off with your thoughts on West Ham.
Man, every week I start to become a little bit more and more of a fan of West Ham. You just can't not root for them when they're playing. And that game against Chelsea, that was fun to watch. And I think the biggest thing, not only for the result, right? They get the result, the 3-2 win, and get a little bit of spark of momentum. But that, not only did they get that, it was how they got that win, right? I mean, they had to overcome a little bit of adversity. Willian had an incredible free kick. I think there was a PK in the game. And despite all of those things going on, the way when the PK came, it came right after a VAR call that reversed their goal. It's like they had to go through this adversity just to beat Chelsea. And then they win in like the 89th, 88th minute, get the game-winning goal. It's just like I talked about the stars aligning for Arsenal. The adversity was there for West Ham, and because they overcame that, they had as much momentum as anyone going into the Newcastle game. And as long as I've been a soccer fan, momentum is one of the most important things that you can have moving forward. And starting the Newcastle game, they scored in like the 3rd minute, right? They carried that momentum forward. I would have liked to have seen them hold on against Newcastle. It was a little disappointing. Every time West Ham scored, Newcastle seemed to answer within a couple minutes. And I think that's the recipe for crushing momentum. But they did get an important point. And in a race when you're trying to stay out of relegation, every point matters. And if you had asked them last week going into this week, hey, how'd you feel if you came away with 4 points? they'd be ecstatic. And I think because of how they got those 4 points, I would almost go as far as to say I really think West Ham is solidifying their safety in the Premier League. And I'm rooting for them to do so because they're fun to watch. They're a really interesting team, and they really come together this week. And what's going to be big for them is what happens with Declan Rice. I mean, he is an absolute engine on the field, and it's, there's some rumors and things going on surrounding him. But if they do stay up and he stays, I think that team could be an interesting project to look for in the future. But as far as this season goes and this week goes, it's an important momentum week for them, and it was really fun to watch.
I definitely second that. Before I get my words in, Andy, what do you think?
No, all in all, I mean, you got to say that West Ham have just been playing so well recently, right? I mean, their form has been pretty good over the past couple of weeks. You can see that David Moyes' seniority as a manager is definitely kind of trickling into the club, and they're playing pretty well of recent games, which is great to see. If you watch the West Ham and the Chelsea game, I mean, Antonio was dancing on Rudiger and Christensen like it was nothing. I mean, you have to say that was definitely a pretty big defensive fault from Chelsea's side of you, letting Antonio just have that much freedom in that space. But ultimately, West Ham exploited it. They noticed it, and Antonio was getting in some great spaces and making some great opportunities, which is great to see them do against a class side like Chelsea. All in all, I mean, I think West Ham are moving in the right direction. They've pretty much secured their spot at this point. I think they're up by, 6 or 7 points now. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. But I think that they definitely have a shot at, continuing that form and sticking it through to stay in the Premier League.
Yeah,
if I could piggyback off of one thing, Andy mentioned Antonio. I thought it was really cool that you mentioned that. His goal that he scored, I think it was West Ham's second goal. I'm not 100% sure. But there was a point where he got brought down in the box. And, most players, they're going to go down, look for a PK, and not really get back up. But he goes down. He has an instance of, oh, my God, I just got fouled. But he realizes the ball is still out on the right flank, and he gets right back up, runs the 6-yard box, and scores the goal instead of, asking for a penalty kick that wasn't, you never know what was going to happen. And it's the engine trait of Declan Rice and the effort level of someone like Antonio. They just want it, and you can see that they want it. And that's reflective upon David Moyes and the coaching staff, and I think that's going to be the reason that carries them forward. But you mentioned Antonio. It reminded me of that. I just had to piggyback because it was just so fun to watch, man.
Definitely. Frankie, I have quite a bit to say on this. I'm not a hammer, but, I dabble into the claret and blue. So, Frankie, what's your takeaway on, West Ham's week?
Yeah, I think, you guys kind of brought it up about how the performances that they're putting out are really showing how badly that they want it, how badly they want to show the rest of us that they are a Premier League team. And you can really see that through the results of them putting in against teams like Chelsea, other clubs like that are fighting for relegation like Bournemouth. They were one of the ones that we didn't really expect to keep fighting. And out all those down there in the bottom, you can really tell that West Ham want to stay up in the top flight of English football. And I really want to see, like Tyler said, this project keep going on because with David Moyes behind them, seems like a pretty promising project right now.
I agree. I think it's been a promising project in the works even before the lockdown. They had a tough loss at Liverpool. When Fabianski made an awful mistake. I think David Moyes, he's definitely the right man for keeping a team up right now. He's kind of like the new Tony Pulis, So I definitely think that they have the right guy in charge. He's got people defending who normally wouldn't defend. When you got Lanzini playing defense, you've got the team together, and they got one goal, and that goal is to stay up. Now, East London is a area that is like very blue collar, and they're very big on their their West Ham and their hammers. So I think it's Yarmolenko is a legend right now. So like that late goal, to beat Chelsea in a London derby, that goes a long way in their supporting. Mm-hmm. And I think Tyler brought up a good point that more and more every day like you're rooting for them to stay up because they're one of the only teams at the bottom that even looks like they're wanting to stay up. Watford's throwing away games, Bournemouth isn't showing up, and they got 2 goals for the first time I think since COVID. So I think at the bottom West Ham definitely look like they're looking promising to stay up. They're almost out of the fight. When you look at it, they're on 31, 27 right now is Aston Villa and Bournemouth. So I think they're on the right direction. I think Antonio, when you look at what he did in that game and his interview after the game and how ecstatic he is, he sees what it means to the club. That's coming from a man who scored one of the last goals at Upton Park, right, before it went away. So he's a West Ham guy through and through. And they need those guys if they want to stay up. You can't bring in, Fornals and think you're going to be okay. You can't buy your way when you're in London. It's just hard when you're not a top six, one of the top squads. So as a small London club supporter myself, I appreciate what they're doing and what they're not small like my team, but they're definitely middle tier, right? So I appreciate what they're doing, and I think they're in the right direction there. More power to them. I'm excited to watch their upcoming weeks and their fight. So we got a big team, the defending champions. They're having a rough week. A mixed week. They killed Liverpool. They lose to Southampton today, 1-0. Frankie, what's your take on Man City?
Okay. Obviously, those who know me and have seen the show, not the biggest Man City fan, and I say that very lightly. So for me, I guess good, decent results to them. Obviously, Pep's probably gonna lay it into them in the dressing room after the Southampton game. That's not something that they should be doing, especially after beating Liverpool 4-0. Which, going to that result, not one I really want to talk about, but obviously pretty good on the City end. I think it's fair to say that Liverpool weren't quite in their full flying form for that match, but still something that the recently crowned champions shouldn't be allowing to happen. So hats off to City for a 4-0 win there. But moving forward, I think City is really looking forward to the FA Cup, like you were saying about Arsenal. I think that's probably Pep's most highest priority right now, aside from Champions League whenever that comes back after the season. So I really think he's really just rearing up for that, because as far as staying second or third in Premier League, they pretty much got both those locked down. So they're just looking forward to the FA Cup, in my opinion.
Yeah. Andy?
Yeah, so when you recap the Manchester City and the Liverpool game, City played with incredible focus. So did Liverpool for the beginning. So did Liverpool as well for the beginning a couple minutes of that game. But City played with real focus, and to see them play with that much focus in the Liverpool game and then come into the Southampton game and not really be able to convert on a lot of opportunities. They had 26 shots, only 6 of them on target. When you look at a team like City and all those scoring prowess that they have, that really shouldn't be too much of an issue for them, especially against a Southampton side. But Southampton looked really disciplined. They've had great results these past couple games. So if I'm a Southampton fan, I'd be really excited with the form that my team's currently in. But going back to City, with the departure of Sané, there's a couple you could kind of draw with thinking about do they need anything to kind of fix their squad? Do they need to be active in the market? And there's a lot of questions that could be asked of City, just kind of drawing from these two games in general. But next they have Newcastle and they have Brighton next in the Premier League. So you've got to say City are looking good with those next couple results. But there's a lot of questions that could be said drawing from these two games, especially with how differently played City were between those games.
Definitely. Who's your favorite performer of the week, Andy, for City?
For City, Kevin De Bruyne. This guy is unbelievable. He's about to break the assist record. He's got 17, should have had 18 on the weekend, but unfortunately, one of those was given an own goal in the Liverpool game. But I have to say, KDB has just been an unreal player this season, and I think that'll continue to.
Yeah. Tyler, what's your takeaway on City this week?
Yeah, talking about players, I actually like Gabriel Jesus. I think he's filled in for Aguero quite well, and what he does off the ball is really impressive, and he creates a lot of chances. But as far as the Southampton game goes, how about McCarthy? I think he deserves a huge round of applause because, yes, City, they had 26 shots, and I think you said only 6 were on target. But of the 6 that were on target, he made some incredible saves. And the biggest takeaway for me from that specific game was City was getting frustrated. And I think that's a huge factor because when you look at the game against Liverpool, I'll spare Frankie. I don't think there's too much to say there, right? Liverpool's got the Premier League clinched. They're not in the FA Cup. They're not in the Champions League. Their season's done. Like, they're celebrating. They were probably hungover playing the game. And everyone talks about, well, that's not how champions should play. But who cares how champions should play? They won the championship. And whether they win or lose against City, it really doesn't take that away. But City, going from that 4-0 victory against a team like Liverpool, even though that's where Liverpool was coming from, and going into a game against Southampton, part of me wants to say, they're kind of in a similar situation. They've got second place more or less locked up, worst case scenario, third. Like Frankie said, I think the FA Cup's a huge focus for them right now before going into Champions League, and they probably walked out against Southampton expecting to win the game without 100% effort and not expecting a red and white wall that was in front of them. And with every shot that they took, they seem to get more and more frustrated. And I think that's something that Pep needs to keep an eye on. It's something to be concerned about, because when you're in these games that for City is kind of like, whatever, it really shouldn't be a ton of frustration coming out of there. And you don't want to be going into the FA Cup or Champions League with that kind of form and that kind of frustration. And I think, like you said, Andy, everything about City this weekend has been negative. The loss against Southampton, the loss of Sané, all this controversy swirling over whether or not they're going to be banned from the Champions League, and then now they got to go and try to complete the EPL campaign, and then go against an FA Cup team in Arsenal that arguably wants the trophy more than anyone. Talking about what one positive thing that Arsenal needs, a trophy is one of those things. I don't think it's an easy road ahead for Manchester City, and I think it could really come crumbling down fast, as good as they've been over the course of the long term. So that's going to be something to also keep an eye on, and hopefully they can turn it around and have some good matches and good form coming up, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I think my takeaway from City of the Week, Liverpool game, they needed that for themselves. Of course, Liverpool doesn't need to show up. No one's won a championship this quickly, right? They got 8 games to chill. No one's had that before. So, you can't disrespect what they did and what product they put out, but they looked like they were still together. They just kind of stopped caring after 2-0. I think Sterling was my player of the week because of his performance against Liverpool. He dominated the game. He's pretty quiet today against Southampton. He's always involved, but nothing has stuck out like Gabriel Jesus, like you said. I think, Alex McCarthy had a great game. But every shot that was blocked, or every time that someone was trying to get a shot on target, there was bodies. James Ward-Prowse had a great game for Southampton today. So I think it's an interesting one today. It's a conundrum. You don't want to see it with City. They shouldn't be in those games, but they were. I think City. You guys say City's target is FA and also Champions League. I think that's right. I think the upcoming potential ban on them is going to weigh heavy on some players' minds. So we'll see how that turns out. But I think if I'm Pep, I'm mad. Pep at Barcelona.
Absolutely.
He didn't lose to Lecce. 1-0. It just didn't happen. So
didn't happen at Bayern either.
No, yeah, right. So he's got to be mad at his squad. City has so many talking points. I think the biggest thing with City right now is they need to find exactly what they want to do. And I think you're right with Gabriel Jesus, but, maybe they go out and get someone else if they don't have a transfer ban, because Aguero, if he's going to keep getting hurt, who knows? But kind of KDB topic that Andy brought up brings up a good point. I think the records are important this year, and we have the Golden Boot coming up. So before we get into Golden Boot conversation, I want to talk about Transfer Tuesday. We have a new thing coming out on Instagram Live with Andy and Tyler. They're going to just talk all things transfers. There's a lot of gossip, with transfers. So make sure you check that out yet. We'll throw out a time. I don't think we've really got that down yet. So just look out for that. Once again, Instagram handle is the Reserve Squad. You will not be able to find it on the YouTube channel. It will be on Instagram Live for now until we kind of work out the kinks, I think. So, but definitely tune in. A lot to talk about. A lot of confirmed transfers. A lot of gossip. A lot of movement already. More than I can remember in any recent years. So, everyone check that out. Golden Boot. We have a good Golden Boot race. We have 21 goals from Jamie Vardy. Congratulations on your 100th goal in the Premier League. It's a big feat for someone who didn't show up until he's 26 or whatever.
Yep.
So, Aubameyang on 19, Ings on 18, who is single-handedly keeping his team in it. And without him, they have 27 points. So Kun Aguero hurt, sitting on 16. And then you have Salah and Sané round up the back half, I believe. Frankie, who's your prediction? Who wins the Golden Boot?
I think Vardy's going to go ahead and lock it up. He's the main man for Leicester, obviously. And with their remaining schedule, I really think he's going to be the one to pull out the points for them.
Yeah.
He's got 2 ahead of Aubameyang, and I think, like we were saying earlier, I think Arsenal's main focus is going to be for the FA Cup. So maybe they save Aubameyang for those key games, in spite of some for the league matches. So I think I think Vardy's going to go ahead and lock it up.
You got a number, you think? What's he hit?
I think he's going to probably get to, I'll say 25.
Yeah.
I think he can do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Andy, Golden Boot winner. Who is it?
I got Danny Ings pulling this one out. I think Danny Ings is too important for Southampton. I think he's going to pull this out. It's going to be a tight race. I mean, what's kind of crazy is when you look at who's in the top right now, you have Jamie Vardy, Aubameyang, and Danny Ings, and those clubs aren't exactly like, I would say, crazy informed teams that you'll have high goal scoring, in those games. So I think it's kind of interesting to see how it's going to play out between the top. But I think Danny Ings can do it. He's been great for Southampton. He's kind of the underdog vote that I think I'm going to go for, but Aubameyang is obviously capable of scoring. Same thing with Vardy. I just happen to think Vardy and Leicester have a tough schedule coming up for the ending of the season, and I don't think there will be a ton of goals coming Leicester's way.
Got it. I like where you're at because, before we move on, Tyler, we got Danny Ings. Southampton's won 3 of the last 5. He scored 3 of the last 4. I don't know if he's going to get the multi-score games that maybe Aubameyang or Vardy could pull off, but I'm rooting for him, man. I think you have to. I think Vardy gets it. I think you have to appreciate what he brings to the table. Once again, showing up late, workhorse. I think he's 31. He could be 33. I'm not sure, but he's an old head. Scoring at the front, and I appreciate that. I think Vardy gets up to 26. I'll one up you, Frankie. Do you have a number for Ings, by the way, Andy? I missed that on you.
I'm going to go with 23, and I think Vardy gets 1 more goal, and it's going to be a win by 1.
Yeah? You could be right, though. They're kind of mixed form, like Tyler said. Tyler, who's your guy?
I'm going with Aubameyang.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I think the magic number hit's going to be 24. Whether Vardy gets that with the last goal or not, I'm not sure. But I really Aubameyang is he has my heart when it comes to the Premier League. And I really like the way that he plays. You talk about capability of getting a multi-goal game. I do think Arsenal have that in them if they continue to have the form that they had over the weekend, right? You talk about their belief in Arteta, and I ask, is this going to be something that's consistent? The reason I pick Aubameyang is because I think they can turn around. I think this is a huge turning point for them. And I think the main goal scorer there is obviously Aubameyang. Now, you do have other guys like Lacazette putting one away in after a beautiful first touch today, but I think most of the goals are going to be coming from Aubameyang. They're going to be supplied from the wings and in the midfield as well. And I really think that Aubameyang can have 1 or 2 2-goal games that really catapult him up and over Vardy. I think it's going to be very close going into it, but I think 24 is going to be the magic number, and it'll be one of those 2, and I'm going to go with Aubameyang.
Well, Arsenal play Leicester on Tuesday at 3:15, and I would love to watch it be a 4-0 win for Leicester. So me and Peggy
can lock it up, baby.
Who knows, right? Who knows? They're both playing. The former Leicester could come into play. The former Arsenal might come into play. We'll see. And then we have Southampton plays on Thursday. They play Everton. So once again, another team that's very susceptible to goals. So if Danny Ings puts away 2 there, it might be the time to do it. So I think we got some good fixtures this week to see, for Golden Boot predictions. So look, we're doing good on time here, boys. Quick, I got 2 questions for you guys. First one: does West Ham stay up? Andy, go.
Does who stay up? Sorry.
West Ham.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they're pretty secured at this point. I think they really just need to kind of come through on a couple key games the rest of the season. I think that they have the squad to do it, and they definitely have some good form for them to feed off of in order to get there.
Yeah, Tyler.
Yes, they do, and I think it's mostly because I think they're on the right track with momentum. But I think even more so, the teams below them, I just don't see them getting up and over it with the games that they have remaining. I just don't see it happening. They don't want it as much as West Ham does. So I say yes, West Ham stays.
Yeah, Frankie, West Ham staying up?
Yeah, I have to agree with them. Out of those, below them, I think their only real threat is probably Villa. I think they're the next team that wants to stay the most from what we've seen, and they're 4 points behind, and I don't really see West Ham going below that. Maybe Villa swaps with Watford, but I think ultimately West Ham will be staying.
Honestly, I think West Ham stays up. I was really hoping for Norwich to pull away with the Arsenal game, because after playing with Brighton upcoming, if they could have pulled away 2 wins and gotten into the relegation fight and tied for 27, Bournemouth's going down.
Yeah.
Hate to say it, but Watford doesn't. I'm a Watford guy. I like Troy Deeney. I like their style of play a few years back. I'd like to see Watford stay up, but Villa can't score either. So I don't know. It's so interesting down there between the bottom, the 17th, 18th, and 19th. You can't even say bottom 4. Norwich is in the.
Mm-hmm.
So, cool. I just wanted to see everyone's thoughts on that. All right, KDB, does he get the record? Tyler, go.
Oh gosh, I think he does. I really do. I think he deserves it more than anything, right? And I know when I got introduced on this podcast, one of the things that I said was I really root for people who deserve things to get them. And I think KDB definitely deserves it. He's definitely a world-class player. I think he's peaking, and maybe even not. Maybe he's got more room to grow and potential to have. But I really think he deserves it. I'm rooting for him to get it, and I would not be surprised if he did.
Yeah. Andy, what's your take?
I think so. I mean, KDB is just so impressive. He's so vital to the team. And even when he comes in, that you can just feel the City side shift momentum and, feed off of that energy that he brings. So I think it's pretty easy for him to get assists at this point. I mean, he's only got to get 3 more just to tie the record. I think he easily gets about 22.
Yeah. Frankie, you think he gets 20, 21?
I think he's going to break the record. I mean, if you look at the remaining fixtures they have, I mean, they got Newcastle, Brighton, Bournemouth, Watford, Norwich. Whether he's coming on as a sub or if he's starting the game, he's bound to get an assist per game at least. I mean, he's probably been the best player in the Premier League this season. His consistency and the impact that he brings to the table has just been phenomenal and world class. So I think he really, like you said, he deserves it. And I think he will get it.
And I could be wrong on this, but I think he has at least 8 Premier League goals. I think he has 11 for the season. I don't know if they're all Premier League, but I know he's got 11 goals in all competitions this year. He's having a very well-rounded year. I think he gets it with Norwich on the table, Brighton and Bournemouth. Man, KDB might walk away with 15 goals and 24 assists. So what a year that would be. So I'm rooting for him. Any last comments, boys? We got 3 minutes here.
Well, I think staying on the KDB topic, I'll throw this in. And I think he had one point. I think he was the holder of the German league assist record for quite some time. I think he had it back when he played Wolfsburg. That's no longer his after this season. Thomas Müller broke that. So I think that could provide a little extra motivation for him to go after it in the Premier League. I also think it carries more weight in the Premier League, but I got to get a little bit of Bayern Munich in here sometimes. And that's a perfect opportunity to do it because Thomas Müller has been in great form this season too. And he broke the assist record in the Bundesliga, and that was pretty cool to see. But I do think Kevin De Bruyne is just a special player. And yeah.
Andy, any last comments for the episode?
All in all, great week. The top 4 race is ever so tight. It's only getting tighter, and the games are slowly trickling away. So it'll be interesting to see how the ending tops. I'm excited.
What a week. What a week for the Red Devils. It's a good time to be a fan. Frankie, what's your last takes?
Just looking to an exciting finish to the season. I hope a lot of players and teams can stay healthy and finish out the season strong. Yeah. I hate to see teams down low get relegated. You don't really want to see teams leaving the top flight when they just got here. It's rough, but it's a tough league, man. Most competitive league in the world. So they say. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
It is. And on that topic, my hot takes are: 1, Alex McCarthy, great game, QPR boy. So gotta root for that. Also, QPR won 1-0, so that's big for me. I gotta throw in my flavor. And Wigan administration, that's crazy. Maybe we gotta talk about that, next week and see how that develops or something. And QPR beat Middlesbrough, who's about to go down to League One. Middlesbrough and Hull are both in fight for League One. They're trying to avoid relegation, so the tumble's real. So when you see a team like Norwich, up and down, it's almost impressive that they can do that. So, we'll see where it goes. So, boys, we'll reconvene next week. Good episode. Big games this week. Really looking forward to Newcastle City, seeing if De Bruyne can get on the board, maybe a few assists. So we'll see. And I believe tomorrow we have Everton versus Tottenham, which very interesting game. So we'll have to talk about that. But yeah, thank you guys for your time. It's been fun.
Look out for Transfer Tuesday.
Yeah, Transfer Tuesday.
Yeah.
Do not forget. We don't have a time. We'll throw that out. Instagram Live. All right. Give us a follow at the Reserve Squad on Instagram and on YouTube. Subscribe. Just go ahead and type in the Reserve Squad. Don't forget the spaces there, and we'll pop right up. So thanks everyone for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your Sunday.